I did.
Good morning, Michael. Good morning, Bill. Who's that with you?
This is one of my granddogs. This is Wu-Tang.
Wu-Tang.
Yep.
My
daughter's
like,
dog.
isn't that like a music group?
Yes, that's how he got named.
Is that
And he's about 5 years
Bill?
old.
I never knew. I can't wait to tell Rich because I feel like he would appreciate that name.
Yeah.
Good morning, Michael.
Good morning. Carol, when we're done, can you drop it?
For those who have logged on, we're just tweaking some tech stuff.
Bill, can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
What is Eli's title?
He's
His job position?
engineering technician.
What's that mean?
It means he does a lot of computations, analysis, field data collection to try to help both design things and review things.
Cool. He seemed to know a lot about the program that we were looking at and kept coming up with more information for us and was open to questions. So it was really great to have him. Thank you.
I feel lucky to have found him. He's a very bright and very articulate young man. Amazingly young. He turned 21 this year.
Did the audio stop working?
Yeah, okay, so.
I can hear you, John.
Thanks, Larry.
Can you guys hear us?
Yeah,
Now we
hear you
can.
now.
Is Dave in?
Michael, can you hear us?
I can. Is Dave is having some difficulty.
Michael, we
getting
can't hear
into-
you.
Oh.
Michael, can you hear us now?
You can't hear me?
Yeah, but we can't hear.
I can hear Michael.
I hear you, Mike.
No, audio's joining. You can hear us.
Yeah, I can hear him as well.
Volume on the TV yet?
I can hear him.
So City Hall can't hear me.
So it comes through the owl. It should be coming
So Dave got booted from the system.
through. There we go. All righty.
Janet, can you hear us?
Yep, no problem.
Okay, so it is now 10:12. We will call the meeting to order. We do have a quorum. I'm gonna turn this over to the manager, but we do have the agenda. There's 7 items on it, and we'll just plug down through them one by one. So starting off, the FY23 draft budget adjustment. The manager had noted that one item was inadvertently left off, and this is with the Barre Community Justice Center. That was a $7,175 amount. So if you have the old, if you have the paper in front of you, it should be included, but the one that was sent on December 4th would not have had that amount included in it.
Actually,
Okay, any questions on that?
Hey, can you guys hear me?
I can hear you, Michael.
Okay, so
Yeah, they can't hear me.
we can hear you, Michael.
They can't hear us.
So people are having a difficult time getting into the meeting. I just got a text from Dave Delcor who said that the host has another meeting in progress when he tries to log back in.
Make sure he's looking at the right agenda, at the agenda that's published on the website for today, not Tuesday's agenda, but today's agenda.
I had that,
understand that, and he
I had the same
understands
issue.
that too.
I had that same issue. And the solution is to go to the website and then log in through the council.
So, 1 minute.
I
I'm
actually did that.
texting him back.
I logged in through the website, got the same issue. So what I did is I logged into the website, got the same issue, but then it eventually let me in.
So the answer is keep trying.
The answer is when you go to the website, the second one from the top is the December 18th agenda. That's the link to use to come into the meeting, and everybody else is.
I understand that, but when you click on the link, it doesn't matter which link because it's the same link that came in the council packet for Thursday. The link gives an error when you're trying to log in.
Copy the link and paste it in. It's not a clickable link.
I understand that. It still gives you the error when people are trying to call in. So I'm just giving you a heads up. Yeah.
So Michael, do you mean not the Zoom link to be on Zoom, but you're saying the number to call in?
Again, I understand that. You click the link, you put the link into the thing, it just says the host is on another meeting, okay, it happened to me. I had to do it 2 or 3 times to get it to work. I'm just telling you. I don't know what to tell you then.
Using the Saturday link, not the Tuesday link.
I was clicking the Saturday link.
So we've
I'm
done.
just warning.
Yeah, Councilor Watts is actually logging in again on it, and he said he could, so we'll continue moving forward. So, Councilor Hammer did have his hand up on that item, so.
Yeah, I was just curious, so this is a direct, my question is this an organization that's directly funded by the budget, and, or is this a voter approved assistance?
This is built into the budget.
Okay. So what's the history of funding some organizations through the budget and then making other organizations go through outside agencies?
Just council decisions in the past. There's nothing in there that hasn't been approved by the council. There's no organizations in there at my initiative. Just worked in the budget over the years.
Okay. But certain organizations have been favored by council, prior council.
Well, I don't know that somebody's been favored to the disadvantage of somebody else. It's just that at the times,
I mean, you're making one set of people jump through a whole bunch of hoops to get a lot of signatures on the ballot, and others are just getting a lineup.
So, for some of the history on this, there used to be a grant through the Department of Corrections that went away. And at the time that grant went away, we actually added information or an amount for it.
The stipend also is in lieu of providing them with space. We used to provide them with space in Alumni Hall, which included, of course, it was all part of the establishment of the Justice Center going back 15 years ago or so.
So, right, it's been there ever since. But no, to your point, it's the same as any other organization, if they're a nonprofit or not. This is one of the top 4 organizations that are in here with the Barre Partnership, the ADC. And the Youth Conservation Corps, which we just took out.
And then, what are the organizations again?
So the Barre Area Development, Barre Partnership, the Aldrich Library. Right here is the Barre Community Justice Center. And if you look on 2 lines below it, we were having a $7,500 amount to work with the Vermont Youth Conservation Corps. Sure. At the last meeting, it was decided that we were going to take that out and have a separate conversation about possibly using central bond funds for river access, which may end up being something that we could utilize with the Vermont.
And there's an agreement with the Barre Opera House as well that has real cash value.
I think there's a $0 agreement with the Opera House for their space utilization.
You're talking about the lease.
Yes, and
Yeah, there's a lease. Yeah.
I mean, there's cash value. So
I'm not sure that the cat, I don't know what that cat value is. The opera house doesn't pay it.
Michael, can you hear us?
I think what Sue means is.
I can barely hear you, but once again, Dave is having a difficult time getting in.
the topic.
And if he's having a difficult time getting in, that means other people might be having a difficult time getting in.
Okay, well, if I might, my feeling is I just clicked into this meeting, I got in fine on my laptop. And while, you know, I pushed for us to buy this camera and make the system permanent, and it does have its flaws. And we do offer it as a convenience, not a way to, so if it's not working, I'm sorry, but we have to continue on with the workshop. I did have one question on the Criminal Justice Center statement. I was just curious what the, how the increase with the it went from like $160 increase in 21, and then another $175.
Well, it's just, I think it's just a 2.5%.
I just thought that was-
So on that same note, I think with the other organizations, we went from a 2.5 down to a 2.
Yes.
So should we do the same for this?
I would say so, just to be equitable.
I mean, it's not much,
I was
but
gonna say that, save that $175.
At $35. Okay, any other questions on that item? Okay, seeing none, moving forward, discussion on the Civic Center financial analysis. So, Councilor Stockwell had asked for those finances, and Don had pulled up, I think, at least a 10-year.
We've got hard copies of that too.
I'll pull it up on the screen. This is the one that was sent via email a couple days ago.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So Don, did you want to provide, once it does up on the screen, a little more about the analysis? I will note, I did ask the question about, we had some capital expenditures, for example, the painting of the roof up at the BOR, we had a chiller system that went, and I believe that those are not included in this, but those are capital expenditures for.
One thing I love about this is it shows how much subsidy it takes each year to operate this auditorium. And I know that the city has gone back and forth on whether or not cemeteries or recreation things should be treated as enterprises or just rolled into the general fund. But I think they do function a lot like enterprises. They have an entrepreneurial aspect where you can bring in revenue through particular investments. And seeing it framed like this, and to the extent that it can be managed like an enterprise fund, even if it does require a subsidy each year, there's a conversation and real transparency about how much subsidy is provided to cost centers that potentially could be self-sustaining.
Yeah, well, this pretty explicitly shows to the extent that the general fund is subsidizing the civic center, as Director of Policy is very explicit as to what that is and how it varies over years.
Don, do you have any questions? I would just like to add that you'll see a column, I don't know if there's a header, but it says summer maintenance under both the revenue and the expenditures. That is time of the facility individuals that they spend during the summer out mowing, taking care of the parks, etc. So we took that out of their salaries that ultimately go to the auditorium or BOR, wherever they're located. But we back that out of the equation so you get an actual picture of work that they're spending in the facility.
So, by the way, I was chair. I recently changed to vice chair, so I'm just speaking on behalf of my less senior role right now as vice chair. I just wanted to say that on behalf of all of the volunteer members of the Civic Center Committee, we view the complex up on the hill as a resource for the community and beyond the region. And it is definitely an economic development tool, but it also serves the purpose for public education, public health. All sorts of different activities take place up there. And so we try to recover, of course, through fees, some of the expenses of running the facility. But at the same time, we look at different categories of money. The first that is fairly easy to track that Don has put together here on the table is how much money comes to Barre City through fees and how much do we spend to actually maintain that facility. The second category of money associated with the Civic Center is that a presenting organization that actually sends Barre City a check for the use of the facility, of course, is charging for tickets and other use of the facility. Their organization is sprinkling the dollars that they've received throughout the community in a secondary fashion. If you look at the footnote C, there's another category of money, and it's this kind of nebulous category of, hey, when there's an event up on the hill, footnote C says, yep, there's lots of money that's sprinkled to small businesses in the community. I wanted to just pause on that idea because it's kind of squishy. You don't really know how to look at it. there's an organization down in DC called Americans for the Arts, and they've done extensive economic assessments about events and what kinds of economic benefits come to the community from, let's say, a ticket purchase, whether it's at the Barre Opera House or coming to an event like Studio Place Arts. So I'm just going to give you a synopsis of how to look at an event up on the hill. Let's say that the event has 3,000 attendees, and of those 3,000, 60% come from Washington County, 40% come from outside of Washington County. Now, the attendees who come from within Washington County are going to drop on average $23.44 in the community. The ones that travel from outside Washington County, and I said 40%, just so we can come up with a number, $47.57. So when you look at how that sprinkles for one event of 3,000 attendees, that's around $99,000. And so that's real funding that comes to support the local businesses here. And I felt like this was the most equivalent economic assessment that we could look at with respect to the events that go on up on the hill. Then finally, there's a fourth category of revenue. And this gets a little bit more difficult to quantify. And it's that notion that what goes on up on the hill gets regional participation. It's like our calling card as a community. And it means that instead of running an open house with a bunch of people drinking cocktails and wearing suits, we're having fun up on the hill. And people from all over the state are coming to have fun with us. And they're getting to know Barre City. Some of them choose to buy a house. I was one of those persons. I bought a house after I attended an event up on the hill. Others choose to do other things. They view maybe a business as more viable because we have a complex that has a huge amount of potential. It's an asset. So I just wanted to put that thinking out on the table so that when people talk about, well, gee, why are we involved in a large civic center complex? I think I and also all the members of the community committee view it as one of the most important assets for economic recovery and growth that the city of Barre has.
So councilors, any questions?
We haven't spent any money so far for 21 to 22. Fuel oil, is that just because it's been on season before, or is that fixed?
I think the old stuff started.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So yeah, so realistically on 2022.
And this was what, like November?
This was through November.
Councilor Stockwell?
It looks like the traditional sources of revenue have been low for quite some time. In some cases, there hasn't been revenue in the sources that are listed. So are there other sources of revenue or this market complex so that it's bringing in some money? Taking a, let's have COVID, taking apart the COVID part. But it looks like even far before COVID, these revenues were not coming in. So we continue to have this line unless we have some new sources. Community center. It's arch.
The one revenue that I'll note is the cell tower, and you'll see that decreases over time. And that was due to an agreement that we had, and that was on the hill, you had a tower that was bringing in some of the revenue. But I believe they moved to North Barre Manor.
AT&T opted out of their contract, I want to say 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. I think that was around $40,000.
It was an $87,000 in total hit, with $65,000 a direct hit to the general fund balance. The other 25% goes to a capital fund for the BOR. That was a big hit to the.
And we've also had other conversations of what the fees should be if you were renting space up there. There's a cost benefit. You might be able to bring in more individual groups if you had a lower cost. We've talked about ice time, trying to entice people that maybe they would normally go to a St. Johnsbury versus here, just to see if that would bring more revenue. So those fees have been discussed. The number of events, I mean, if you look at the FY21 numbers, there just weren't in-person events, so you'd see a big hit there.
The other thing, and we are definitely very eager to fill the space with classes and other activities, but there's also a small, just right before the COVID situation changed, we were improving, for instance, the restroom facility, so the space could be attractive for offices. We kind of went through a period of time where there was some upkeep that was absolutely essential to attract a certain level of use of the space, and we were just finishing up, and then the pandemic arrived. So it's a little frustrating to some level, but we were turned down in-person events because of the scruffy quality of some of the space.
Well, and over time, different organizations have outgrown the use of these. Montreat, cities and towns used to have town fair here, or every other year or something like that.
The agricultural show.
Yeah, the ag show, the Rotary used to have their annual home show there. I don't think they left because of facilities. I think they left because they got too much to do. So a lot of our larger rentals in past years have drifted away. And it's hard to replace those large rentals. I mean, a major focus of the Civic Center Committee has been and is that very question: how can we find ways to increase revenue and so on? The marketing agency, McWilliams, on the Yeoman's job, trying to reach out. Part of the problem is that it's a unique facility and it doesn't necessarily meet everybody's needs. It's great for sports, athletics, ice skating, so on and so forth. But the typical convention, I mean, the state credit union, 10 years ago or more, used to have their annual banquet. They don't even have a banquet. So to the extent that I think there's a very concerted effort to be sensitive to and to try to create new rental sources, new users, new tenants. It's been muted by the drifting away of tenants over the years. Some of those larger ones, it's harder to replace.
So Don and then, I'm sorry, Henry.
I just had a quick question. This goes probably more to Rick. At the Civic Center Committee meeting the other day, we were talking about the fiber in the auditorium. Is that a legit thing? That's for like the gun show, that they can tap into the Wi-Fi easier now this coming year?
There is no fiber in the auditorium connected. There's fiber drops in the auditorium. One which was the old AT&T cell tower drop, which is now going to be utilized for fiber in Alumni Hall. So that will increase that meeting space speed as we move forward. But currently it's just a DSL line for the Wi-Fi in the auditorium. It could be increased, but currently it's just a DSL line.
Okay, and then, but since the last gun show was held, pre-COVID, we have upgraded the Wi-Fi capabilities in the auto, right?
We upgraded the Wi-Fi system to better access points, more efficient access points, yes.
Thank you.
That's right.
Thank you, Mayor. One idea that I really like from Councilor Booten is really looking at every revenue line. And I know you talked about concessions, and I know there's no concessions planned for this year. And although that's such a small amount of money, I think it's kind of symbolic about to how entrepreneurial or what are the opportunities to be entrepreneurial with this facility. To Councilor Stockwell's point, it seems like it may be time to think about a review of what are the opportunities, what would it cost to expand opportunities, and what are the revenues on the other side. It's some type of a planning exercise or at least a business planning exercise. And I'm just curious, like, what type of investments would this budget need to make to start thinking spaces and improvements and integrating capital planning to bring in more revenues.
Yeah, one thing that the budget doesn't show is the different groups that utilize the space. They tend to volunteer and donate. So the speaker system and the OR was upgraded basically as a donation in that area. The locker rooms were upgraded too.
Now, well, they're fairly scruffy. But there is some work in progress to take a look at the design of the basement floor to make it more useful for a variety of people. You know, one thing in addition to the restrooms that I mentioned earlier is just being fixed right before the pandemic is that we got new insulated floor cover for the auditorium so that when visitors came to an event, they didn't have to walk on plastic tarps. You know, it's a huge degree of improvement for sound absorption and also just, it's kind of cheesy to come in and walk on plastic tarps. So there have been some things that I think the committee has looked at and has, you know, improved over the last 4 years that will really make a difference once we get out of the pandemic.
So, Councilor Emmerich, assuming what you're saying is what kind of investments, that would be a topic that we could ask the committee to look into other revenue sources.
Yeah, I'd definitely be curious about, if, you know, to what extent, like when you hear about enterprises, recreation enterprises like in Essex and Colchester, bringing in hundreds of thousands of dollars each year to support the operations and self-sustain those operations. It makes me think, just makes me wonder, what are they doing differently and what could we learn, whereas we're subsidizing. And I think Sue makes a really great point that subsidy has tremendous economic value. And maybe going through that type of business planning exercise would make us look at and talk across organizations. We have pretty silo, or we have maybe silo is not the right word, but we have economic community development organizations, the partnership, the ADC, and activities that are happening in the recreation department, civic and auditorium. Are there opportunities to coordinate, and to what extent could this be strengthened as a regional center? I mean, what if we had a state-of-the-art meeting room for the Central Vermont Chamber, or the Regional Development Corporation, the Solid Waste District, and the Regional Planning Commission, where these people all came together? The power brokers of this region are right here making decisions among the Civic Center auditorium. How do we start thinking like that in those conversations? And I think it seems like it might take more than just earnest committee members giving their evening hours, but some real support.
So just a question on the hundreds of thousands from Colchester or Essex. Are you saying that's a civic center of their own, or are you talking about recreation?
No, I'm just talking about their kind of recreation enterprise.
Well, and just think of the size of those municipalities compared to ours. With 4 square miles, they have more recreation space. They might have a lake next door. Things that we don't have, where there's more recreation opportunity.
Yeah, well, it's easy to make excuses why we can't. It's much harder to just find ways to say why can't we, you know, find paths.
I'm just making sure we compare apples to apples in those.
Could you talk a little bit about the civic center? This will be in somewhat response to your question.
Well, Councilor Wozniak did, and then we'll go to.
Well, first off, I agree with the overall point that Councilor Emmerich is making, in that, you know, we've always been, besides the capital work there, that always come up unexpectedly because we live in Vermont. I feel like we've had a conversation a few times how to, you know, basically make that complex a 21st century complex, whether it's the sports facilities or the meeting capabilities, like just having good, easy to connect to Wi-Fi. It's like if I was planning any sort of event for any sort of business or organization, I'm gonna look for somewhere that has easy free Wi-Fi. That's just part of the deal.
Well, now that you make that comment, Jeff or Rick, I believe with the improvements that we made, we're there. Are we not? Wi-Fi is accessible to renters in the auditorium. Improvements to make it more accessible for them. Something more that we can do or should do.
I mean, in all reality, we should move it on to fiber and have a much higher speed network. Right now, we're running, we're running a 2-cylinder instead of an 8.
And when you have, 100 people, all nowadays, everyone's trying to connect their phones and.
Well, and they're all doing research, whether they're,
Right, so just, yes, your point's taken, Steve, but taking that to the next level. And, post the banking group or whichever it was that you just mentioned, it's been bank with anymore. And there's a lot of organizations that have been going through changes like that post-COVID. And there are going to be organizations who aren't gathering people in a hall anymore. And I think we would be well prepared to have a plan for that complex that reflects that. So that's my soapbox. My actual question is, in fiscal year 17 and 18, our net was our deficit was much lower. And we had AT&T back before fiscal year 17, there was a high deficit, 17 and 18 less than 10,000. And then moving forward. What were we doing in 17?
They had a new couple of events at the Comic-Con. So basically, there were some opportunities that we jumped on. Unfortunately, it's not us.
was that Comic-Con and there was some others? Was that around that time too? That's what she said. Oh, wait here.
Just so you know, we have the same level of detail for each of the prior years. I just asked Don to put together the last 3.
Yeah.
And the question back to Don on the improvement fund.
Michael has.
Yep, he's next.
So this is a summary that I provide to the Civic Center pretty much on a monthly basis. This is what we consider their capital fund. It's incorporated in the whole city capital fund, but I pull out these portions specifically. And you can see that we have received, this was as of 12/6, we received almost 74,000 in banner and dasher ad revenue. That is pretty much a direct hit to the bottom line. It's a surplus. So you can see we went from 25 to 32, and now we're looking at 100.
For the record, the open meeting law is not encouraged, and you're violating it as we speak.
Just as a point of order, how are we violating it?
Meeting, right?
We're having our meeting, people are able to access.
Right, and I was accessing it until I wasn't. Try and sign on from the link that's on your website. Good. Try.
Right now, we're looking at.
What'd you do?
It's been working.
Capital fund balance for that
Speaker wasn't working.
complex.
There was a.
And at the last meeting, the item on top of spending this was to get a large.
Sign on and it says it's already in progress.
So we can actually have some better.
Hey, listen, the microphones are on at the council seats. And I can't really hear Sue.
Oh, okay, I'll just repeat myself. So Don just spoke about the Civic Center Improvement Fund having a solid balance. Did you hear that? Okay, Don.
Did you hear the description I gave of the fund balance for capital? No. Okay, so I provide this for the Civic Center community usually on Wednesday. It's pretty much their capital expenditure for that complex, capital fund balance. And you'll see that banner dasher ads for this year have already collected almost $74,000, and that's it. Falls almost directly to the bottom line. So we went from 32,000 to 33,000 in the fund balance. Now we're looking at up to 108. For the projection for the year, which the only thing I know for a fact is cell tower revenue. And we're looking at almost 120 grand for their capital expenditures that we can do.
And my, Oh, I was just gonna say, Michael, what I said was at the most recent meeting, we all decided that the very first thing we needed to have at Night Hall was a screen similar to what is available here at City Hall.
Councilor Booth?
I can speak?
Yes.
Okay, so again, I still can't really hear you. I mean, we're talking about the Civic Center and there's lots of things that we would like to see done with it. I have some thoughts on it. I mean, I think, you know, in general, but are we modifying the budget? Because if we're not modifying the budget and just talking about, you know, things to do with it, I think unless we're going to talk about changing what has been presented, I think we could move on, right?
Well, right now, we're having a conversation on the Civic Center financials. So we wanted to make sure that we understood revenue and expenditures in order to understand if there is anything else we want to modify within the general fund.
Yeah, I think one distinction I want to make perfectly clear is this, these funds are segregated. They don't go to the general fund. They don't support general operations of the Civic Center. They're specifically designated to make improvements in the Civic Center to that aren't facilities type, that are intended to make the more attractive to renters. Jeff could probably remember better than I. One of the ones I can remember, not a huge one, but you know, at one of the events a couple of years ago, somebody tends to come out of the auditorium and you miss that first step and people would stumble. Somebody said, you should have some railings. We went out and we got this fund makes improvements to the Wi-Fi, improvements that are intended to be above and beyond normal maintenance and segregated for not to subsidize the general fund.
That's all right.
Thank you, Mayor. And I really appreciate the financial education, just understanding how things work at the Civic Center auditorium. So I think this is helpful. I was curious, so it sounds like we really had a bump in revenue because of the work Stephanie and Jim McWilliams as a volunteer and Jeff up at the selling banner sales.
Jim isn't a volunteer. He gets a stipend.
Okay.
He's an hourly rate. And that's coming out of an allocation made to Civic Center from several bond fund quite some time ago. That stipend is going to run out probably in a year or so for Jim.
Yeah, there's just under 5,000 left in that, out of the 100,000 that was allocated.
And then all of those revenues are going into segregated, all the segregated.
You can see the account numbers right there. Not the
Just for the Civic Center.
Yes.
And but our emergency repairs, $30,000.
That's basic facilities, let's say maintenance or repair. That does nothing to attract. I guess that's.
So, I mean, it's the same thing as when we buy a $800,000 ladder truck. It does come out of the fire department. I know it would be great if we could see how all those funds interact because it's a versus cost separate from operations.
We didn't try to renegotiate on the subcontract when they wanted to know if I could get full revenue.
It was a done deal when they notified us.
Jeff?
Just a little background on the improvement fund. When I first came here, there were some banners hanging in the auditorium. The city had an agreement with the Vermont Principals Association where their executive director was selling the advertising. I think it was like a 50-50 deal. They got half, we got half. The contract expired and I thought, you know, we could handle it on our own. So we took it on. it kind of got out of hand where one person couldn't handle it. That's when we went out and looked for a marketing agent. The Dasher Fund for the ads in the BOR. When we put the new boards in, we had $125,000 bond for those boards. We started the Dasher ad program that paid off that $125,000 bond. And that's when we started, selling more banners and decided, we could build up this fund to buy equipment, amenities to make the Civic Center more attractive to renters. So that's kind of the history and the background of, why we have this fund.
Hey, Jeff, I think, didn't the blue carpet come out of this fund?
Yes, it did.
Portion of it. Yeah.
Other questions? Hearing none, I think it's not really action, but Sue, if you want to bring back to the committee just other revenue ideas, it sounds like the session was one for consideration, and I don't know if you guys want anything else for the review.
Maybe a recommendation on the stipend. So if that stipend's ending and it's a nominal amount, and bringing in $75,000, that sounds like a great investment. Yeah.
And it might be that the stipend ends up coming from that fund to fund stuff.
I just want to say Jim is an outstanding worker. He redefines marketing. He's been surprisingly. Yeah.
Lucas Burnrose has her hand up too.
Yeah.
Bernadette? You're on mute.
Thanks. Okay. Thank you. When we were talking about the use of the Civic Center, we have a lot of surrounding towns that participate and use that. I know we charge rentals, but is there some way to have some of them, especially like Barrytown, because we do so many school things, buy into the Civic Center and help to pick up some of our expenses? Because they certainly have a great resource that if they're not doing that, it's really not being supported by that community, but it's being used by that community. So just asking that question. Thank you.
Well, how they've changed over time.
That would be, Jeff has better history than me, but I think it's very clear that there has been an effort on the part of Barre City to work collaboratively with Barrytown in a number of activities. And of course, we will always look for ways to make that happen.
Yep. Is there anything else you wanted to add to that statement?
They really, I don't see how you can segregate out Barre City, Barrytown. Years ago, the town used to contribute $16,000 to the city for municipal pool operations. When I was on the council in the 90s, early 90s, they reduced it from 16 to 8. And then a few years later, it was from 8 to 0. So basically, good luck trying to go after, and when it's not really towns that come and use the auditorium, it's, the craft show, the woman that runs it is from Plainfield. So it's not a town thing, it's an organization thing.
And I think similarly, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, but if a group like the Spalding High School that has students from both communities come, they're still paying a fee to use the space, just like.
Correct. Yes, like the ice rink, we charge the school for, the high school teams. BYSA is Barre City and Barrytown. They pay the full rate for using the facilities. So yeah, it's not come and use it for free.
Councilor Stockwell?
The decrease in population in Barre City and really decrease especially in families with young children.
So,
Something different.
no, I know what you mean, especially with sports right now. The numbers of students or children that are involved in sports has been decreasing. It's not just Barre, but across the board in general. One revenue source, if those programs don't continue, would, but right now it's a fee for the use of the space. So it will get to a breaking point at some point unless that trend turns around.
I think realistically, elders are interested in remaining physically fit and active. It's just a different category of workout. You know, Zen archery is up there on the list as well. You know, there are a lot of different activities that may be very appealing to people in different age groups. We just have to anticipate this and work very hard to make sure that those groups are encouraged to be part of it.
That's what I was saying.
So two things. First one is, I think that, just to sort of nail down the point here, I think that we should, whether it's a consultant or some sort of firm or whatever, we should look at somebody to come in and look at the long-term needs, the long-term opportunities, the recommendations for how we can use the auditorium, use that complex efficiently, financially responsibly, moving forward. However, I don't think now is the time to do it because we're still in the middle of a pandemic and no one knows how this is going to end. So on that point, do we need a motion or what have you to decide on money for change longer at least next year?
I think you could cross that.
Okay, just like on a during a council meeting, whatever.
I'm not saying you can't or whatever. That's something useful. That stipend.
Well, that is, I would say, let's cross that bridge at a later time.
Okay, yeah, I just want to make it honest to not do anything today.
Oh, I think we'll figure it out. Yeah.
Councilor Booth?
How about you guys take the microphones that are up on the council chamber desks and bring them down? Because
They're not
nobody here can really hear you well.
Are they now? Yeah, these are all tied into the system.
They're all plugged in.
Yeah, but it would take an hour or more to do that. They're all the cabling from CBTV is twisted and wound around itself underneath the desks and.
So, Michael, is it that you can hear certain people and not others?
That is correct, and I'm not the only one. Bernadette was having a difficult time, which it looks like she jumped off.
So what I'll suggest is that we just try speaking louder like we had to at one of our other council meetings to make sure that everyone can hear what we're saying.
Steve, just in the interest of transparency, if the online left for the marketing
great.
stipend is $5,000, $5 an hour. That's another 200 hours. He's spending about 20 hours a week. So that, you know, we're talking 10 to 12 weeks before that runs up.
He's really effective.
He's a bulldog.
Any other questions or discussion for the Civic Center financial analysis?
Thank you.
Moving on to consideration of fund balance allocation for to future budgets.
Yeah, so there was a strategy that I laid out this.
Thank you, Sue.
Early on, they really minimize some. So I thought this was a good time to bring up whether the council wants to subsidize perhaps not just the next year's budget, but you can see 4 suggestions, I just laid out a decrease in subsidy. Don tells me we need to find $40,500 right now to get to a 3% tax rate increase. Doesn't mean you can't go further, whatever. But, you know, with that number in mind, one alternative is the budget, then $40,500 from which we should use that word. And then maybe tweak those. So the advantage of tweaking is it doesn't put a, whether it's a $50,000 hole or a $100,000 hole. So I thought this would be a good point in time in terms of the budget workshop for council to give that consideration, something that the council is comfortable doing. And if you're not, that's fine. Now is the time, I think, to make that decision in the budget development process.
So I'm gonna suggest though that we actually take a step after we talk about the line by line, after we look at if anybody wants to use ARPA funds for any of those positions, just because if the amount is to decrease by a certain amount, it might alleviate the need for that position. So even if it's just a line by line, I think we should probably do that first, just to see if we're going to be whittling down anything else, to see if we get to that 3% first.
That's fine.
If that's fine, we'll just defer that conversation until we do the line by line.
I'd like to have the ARPA conversation about the positions first.
Okay, and do you want to do that before the line by line?
Well, you're probably better because if you.
Yeah, sure. So
Sure, because there are sizable chunks of change involved there. Depending on what council.
So then, council is okay with it. We'll go to item 6, which is discussion on ARPA funding for FY23 staff positions.
I'm not in favor of using ARPA funds for the staff positions. I think we're looking at more permanent positions. And I don't think the idea of using an opportunity that we have at 2.5 and subsidizing permanent staff positions better than a building much longer. I think we can much better using that money. But we're going to have a conversation about our own priorities. But my opinion is we think much better off using that money for infrastructure and other large documents on other large projects than the staff positions. And sorry, but I'm also concerned about what the manager brought up last budget workshop about using trying to keep track of that administratively and figuring out, making sure that if we're funding going 25% from ARPA, then 25% of their job has to be ARPA qualified, and that it's not impossible. Don's a magician, but that's also staff time, that's added cost. So that's another concern I have.
Yeah, so here's another thought. I do have concerns about allocating what we intend to be permanent staff positions to one-time source of funds. I know other communities have done it, and that doesn't mean we can't, but here's a suggestion. I would suggest you work to try to get to the tax rate increase that you feel comfortable with. And as we learn more about ARPA, as we can better define whether there is some staff positions that are subsidized, which would mean, you know, after you approve what it's going to be in the spring or next year, if in my mind, if there's a clear definition of what staff positions could be subsidized by, that's fine. I'm just a little concerned that we can't define that clearly right now, and I hate to make an assumption that we can, and then find out later we got a $59,000 hole. If took the pro Johnson suggestion, taking the pro Johnson suggestion, then that may lead to a fund balance in years that you subsidize those positions. that's not a bad thing, because the discussions that Brett had, a chart of allowances, the 5% authorization of carrying 5% in reserve funds. Well, 5% is about $650,000. So if we were fortunate to have some successive years with, sizable fund balances, what sizable, $50,000 or $100,000 or more, that could help to build reserve fund. History shows us that many times we've had surpluses, and if something happened the next year, it gobbled up. So it's not a sure thing, but if in subsequent years you have fund balance allocated to it.
So Mel, Carol, Jake, and Don.
I'm gonna hold until I hear a little bit more.
Just didn't know whether there might be items in the proposed budget for one-time expenses, increases for some supplies to increase inventory, things like that might qualify for ARPA, that might be ways that we could put ARPA money into the general fund. That wouldn't be tied to out years.
Mayor, my gut is that this fund balance is going to be a little bit of a fluke, and that it's a little bit of a fluke based on the past. Past behaviors are very predictive of future behavior as an organization, and Steve at the tech meeting last, what day it is? Yeah, last Tuesday, you said on average, we've had about 200 to 500,000 of just unplanned expenses.
Yeah, the 500,000 was a bit high, but I'd say, in any given year, anywhere from $50,000 to $200,000.
Emergency.
Out of woodwork, children at the DOR, boilers at City Hall. And we're working hard to prevent that from happening, but we've got very old facilities. You're gonna see it not too soon. We got $750,000 worth of HVAC investment. We can and should make it in public safety.
And that's it. That exactly makes the exact point that I'm really concerned about, in that we have these tremendous capital needs that this surplus could go into. You can't make capital investments without labor. You don't go to the grocery store without somebody, getting in the car and going down to the grocery store and picking out items and putting them on the cart. It takes labor to make projects happen. And I know Mr. Lozon used the analogy of, we went to the store and we bought bread and milk. But I think the reality is that we didn't leave with any bread and milk. The organization is hungry for human resource capacity to make things happen. And we need that. And really, I think the timing to make that happen is FY22, is to start building capacity for ARPA projects, whether that those be IT projects or community development projects around housing or stormwater infrastructure. Other communities have done that. They did it quickly. And I think, based on at least what I've read so far, is that we can feel pretty confident that certain project management, and I don't view project management as a subsidy. It's an essential part of any project. It's just part of the budget. It's not a subsidy. And, it's just like pre-planning for investments. Capital investments is part of how you appropriately approach public investments. And so I don't view ARPA investment as a subsidy. I view it as needed project management that can help alleviate capacity right now in FY21. And I'm really comfortable with that, and I'm comfortable with the balance allocation of future budgets.
So I think you mean right now in FY22.
FY22, yeah.
And to your point, even from my position in the state, I'm not a project manager, but I've taken project management classes because there are things that don't elevate to a certain level. We're always managing some sort of project or little thing. So This is, I think, to a greater level that we have larger infrastructure projects, and I think project management is the correct term for it. And I would agree. I think that even if we started now, we talked about the IT position, we allocated some funding there to try to get that position in place now. We could do the same thing for housing. We could do the same thing for the DPW director if we wanted to with that fund balance, or to use our funds. So I look at the other communities that have already started this process, and even if it's not at 100%, that's why if we said 75% in the year moving forward, we'd have that leeway of at least 25% to know they're doing something that is not ARPA eligible, and then it can fall into that category. Well, so Don had her hand up first, and then I'll just come around the table again.
I just wanted to clarify a number I had given Steve. The money that we're trying to work for is 47,500, not 40. Correct.
And that's with that police position, the grant funded police position that there was a gap about.
12,000. Yeah, the 12,000.
It is.
You kicked me out.
Are we talking about? I'm just trying to understand. Are we talking for ARPA funding for a staff? Or if we were to use ARPA money? Yes. Part of the position. Well, the other 50% is criminal general plan.
Of the four positions that, I think there are two that lend themselves to properly the system. And I don't know, I would. ARPA specific projects, so that their time projects is easy to track. It's intelligible, so on and so forth, as opposed to saying, well, we're just gonna have specific plan just be ARPA managed. I think if there's a project related nexus that would go with those positions, but nonetheless, those I'm very comfortable that they bring in ARPA management resources. The question is defining which projects they eventually support.
So, I don't want to convolute this too much more, but it says with a COVID nexus, and anything that we have pushed off because of COVID could qualify for COVID, in my opinion. So even with the DPW director, there are projects, and we have several of them that are bond projects that we've already put out there. We might not be able to have done that because of COVID. So those are projects that even that assistant DPW director, projects that I think are eligible for that ARPA funds to have a position there too.
So as I'm understanding this, you're saying that let's say that here that to use some of this ARPA money to and we've not, we have a lot of projects that are out there, as you said, Mayor, that have been on hold because of COVID. However, we have a lot of, more dreams of what we'd like to do. And are they nexuses or nexi or the plural of nexuses? the other things that are, how do we make all of that dovetail into future planning, what's gotten put on hold, and sustaining the positions, and that's, I don't know if that made any sense, but that's.
No, it does. So I'm gonna give some supposals, right? So say there's a housing project that we want to use ARPA funds for. And one of the positions is the planning position. And that position is, we say it's ARPA funded because they're directly going to be associated with that housing program that we're building. So whether that's city funded or work with a partner to do that. And I think, you know, it could go either way, but I think I'd advocate more for someone inside City Hall to assist with that. Then that would be completely funded by ARPA this year. It could even be started like right now, we could put out the RFP, or not RFP, but job application. Similarly, we do the same thing with DPW. And over time, so with housing, if you create more housing, there's hopefully more of a grand list value. So as the grand list comes up, there's a potential that you can build that position into the budget over time. So if, for example, we started with 75% funded, go to 50 to 25 and so on, there could be a way to find that other revenue to fill in those gaps from there. The other way I look at it too for the DPW position is we have the infrastructure bill that just passed. And Bill could be working on the new coming funds while this other position is working on the old backlog of items that we weren't able to. That way there, we might be able to take advantage of new grants that are coming in, pairing it with the funding that we already have within our water and sewer fund or what we're allocating for streets. And the more that we're able to do that, we have that capacity of staff in-house using the RP funds and hopefully over time building up what we need to get to a better point 4 years from now. So
at a price the taxpayers can afford.
And just a reminder, we still don't know, ARPA is not allowed to be matched by federal money. So we don't know what there will have for allowances with regards to the new infrastructure bill and the ARPA money, whether there will be opportunities to partner those together.
but we do have bond projects that are already out there that the ARPA funding position.
The claims argument about custodial position, that's a position that, you know, is needed because of contractual provision requiring divert resources to clean the public safety building. And it created a, you know, an absence of service somewhere else.
I would say yes, with the non for someone.
I think with the right documentation, support that. I support using the ARPA funds, partially to fund some of these positions, because I think otherwise we won't be able to create some structural changes that we're really looking for. All of that stress we have to do positions, have to focus on projects that will enable the city to move in a positive direction.
I do not support the idea of putting ARPA funds into positions within the city. Sorry, I can't do it.
Well, just, that's where I started.
Well, I mean, honestly, I couldn't hear anything when I was at home, and it's really
I'm
frustrating.
about to provide some more context. That's where I started too, when we started talking about this, and I was no, but Councilor Hemrick and the mayor, among others, made a couple good points of, I don't support doing it for all of the positions, I don't think we could, but if we had, I used the example of the junior planner. If we used, let's say, 50% of what it costs to have a junior planner, 50% of that, yeah, ARPA, that person could then manage and implement in a very effective, it would be their job to implement the remaining ARPA money. They'd be like the ARPA person for the city and help that money be used most efficiently.
Which in ordinary times, I wouldn't have a problem with that, but the issue at this moment in time is we're pushing up inflation, okay? And, you know, average individuals who, they just can't afford what's going on at the grocery store versus paying taxes in the city. And I get a feeling that, and I've given this some thought, and we're talking about 4 positions. And I'm actually not sold on the 4 positions at this moment in time. And I'm sorry, Steve, I didn't give you a heads up on this, but I do not support the 4 positions at this moment. We can't, as a municipality, be going all in for adding to our budget during a time when it costs, $3.80 for gas, and the price of milk is going up. And I don't think that we should be taking the ARPA funds and putting that towards any type of position within the city. That's my opinion. So I'll be voting no whenever it comes up.
So just as a proposal with the 4 positions, I believe if it was, if all 4 of them were 75% funded, it'd be about 222,000 year one. Or if it's 50% funded for all of them, it'd be about $148,000. So
Yeah, I think Councilor Booth makes some really good points about what households around the city can afford. But the thing that kind of makes me much more open to using some of the ARPA funding. Using the ARPA funding to or applying that to staff capacity is that the city appears to be digging itself in a financial hole. And with economic indicators that suggest that unless we really change our approach to growing the grant list, things are not going to get better. And I think there's an opportunity with the public works position and the planner to start reversing those trends if they're focused on infrastructure that enhances adjacent real estate value or grows our housing stock and our population. And so that's where I'm feeling more comfortable with those types of investments because they're an investment in the city's financial future and financial sustainability. And at the same time, it's an opportunity to gradually onboard that staff capacity at a lower tax rate.
I mean, I'm still not, and I appreciate your opinion. I'm not there.
Yeah. No, and Michael, so I think the way I'm trying to get at this too is rather than a 3.4% increase in taxes, which is going to hit those same people, if we can somehow lower that amount, it's going to give them a better opportunity to afford that gas or to afford.
I do not expect the inflation to go away next year. I don't think that's going to be something that's going to happen. This is going to be ratcheting up for the next couple years. So, dumping money from ARPA into a position at this moment in time, we're going to have the same conversation in 2 to 3 years. And I say that as I'm recommending that we're going to be giving back, that I recommend that we give back some of the money that we had for the surplus. My thought would be, my thought would be, unfortunately, we can't do 4 positions.
No.
A few things. I totally understand what you're saying. Appreciate that you brought it up. As a question, what positions would you be willing to?
Well, see, and this is where I think there's some sort of like disconnect where what I believe on the budget, which is I tell Steve what I want to see for an increase. And then he comes back with the recommendations that he's going to be able to run the city efficiently or at best. And my issue is the tax rate. I don't think I can support the 4 positions because it's going to push us up too high. And Steve would have to make that decision. We've done that to him before when we removed a position. It was uncomfortable for him. It wasn't fun. We all remember it. Well, not everybody, because none of you were here then, but it was not a fun thing. I know that Lucas and I were there.
And then my other question is, if, for example, I believe you had said putting 50% toward all 4 positions was like 128 positions, does that mandate in turn people who are hired have to use part of their time working hours? That's one.
If we're gonna, if that is to subsidize positions with our funds, there has to be a clear connection between what it is they're doing and the expenditure of those funds. Because we find at the end of any municipality is going to have to be able to justify that the use of their funds were expenditures that can be tied directly back to the eligibility criteria. And that's what's a little bit nerve-wracking about this. We've discussed this before, but this is very unusual. It's rare if it's ever happened. You get the pile of money.
Thank you.
They say, go spend it. And it will tell you at the end whether you spend it correctly. Normally, you've got to submit for you make the expense, and then you submit for reimbursement, and then they review the detailed reimbursement. And if there's an error, that's the right word, then they catch it at the time before you spend an awful lot of money. I mean, it sounds daunting, that's not my intent, but that's one thing unique about this is that so that's why I'm particularly cautious of making sure that whatever decisions we make for the use of ARPA funds are tied back to the ARPA eligible, those 61 eligibility.
And I'm a little less risk worried about this because I've already seen that other municipalities have implemented these types of programs and they have determined that they are eligible. We also have multi cities and towns that can answer any of those questions for us. So if we wanted to, and we say, this is the plan that we want to look at, we could have those interests back.
Yeah, we're communicating.
We have to have some clarity within ourselves as to what specifically they're going to be doing. We have to have that before we hire them.
Well, we have a job description that they'd be applying for. So, for example, we know with a custodian, they're going to be cleaning. This building is going to be one of them. The IT position, we already know the work that they'd be working on. The DPW director, there's bond items that we've already had this out there. And then for the planning position, I think there's a to-be conversation on housing. But I think, if we can have that sooner now. We were discussing the 11th to talk about how to use the ARPA funds in general, and we might even want to move that up to the 4th to have a better concrete understanding about how to really do it.
I need time for the 11th.
No, Councilor Watts, that and Councilor Carter.
So I'm gonna try to thread a needle that may or may not exist. Because I do agree also with Councilor Woods' point about, I also don't, just instinctively, I don't necessarily like the idea of using our one-time big ARPA money for staff positions while we do have a surplus available to us. However, I do very, very much see the value in some basically an ARPA administrator type of position. So what I would be, I'm still not in favor of using ARPA to subsidize all 4 positions and be in favor of a targeted subsidy, something like the junior planner or DPW deputy or assistant DPW director acting as some sort of ARPA administrator. And I also agree with Councilor Booth. The reason we have this surplus, and I agree, Jake, that it's not going to end up being $500,000 or something's going to come up. But the reason we have this surplus is because of the furlough program, because of cuts to services to the taxpayers during COVID. To me, it seems all right to give them basically a bit of a refund on those services that were not used but were taxed. So I'd be in favor of the manager's plan of using the $100,000 over a couple of years, specifically the 47.5, call it 50 this year, to get the tax rate lower and a limited, or I should say targeted, ARPA subsidy to fund a position to help the city use that money as efficiently as possible.
So, I mean, for administering the ARPA funds, I feel like we already put money into the BADC. We should probably utilize the individual that is at the BADC to help administer the ARPA funds. I think that would be useful. He's already said that he would be willing to do it. Is that correct?
Yeah, I guess, and I'll let Dawn speak this to Jen if she's on, but I have some reservations about looking to BADC to support us with our related projects. And those reservations are all of the financial information, all of the administration, the financial administration information is within here, within City Hall. And it gets pretty convoluted when other people are trying to manage grants for us. There's another point I had too, but I'd rather see that capacity installed within some of the positions that we're talking about than relying on other agencies. I think the other thing is that Kobe's executive director already has his commitments to both committees. I mean, how much more can he take on? I mean, we certainly BADC before we had to speak to that. That's it.
I like what Councilor Wazadak's trying to do in terms of threading the needle, but I think we do need to do one question at a time. We're talking about the ARPA right now. Councilor Shambhala, like the point that you're making is that there's a sequencing dimension to this, and that usually you build budgets around goals and priorities, and all those have been kind of pushed back, and now we're at a pressure point where we're trying to make funding decisions, but we haven't had discussions about ARPA. But even though that this is I acknowledge that it feels out of sequence, I think we can reasonably expect that there will be some city project management expense. Administratively, I can't imagine how that can occur, to Steve's point, or Manager McKenzie's point, about outside of an organization. And certainly there may be some ARPA requests that are some direct allocation to other organizations. And you know, BADC had a clear vision about how they're going to grow the grant list. I think this council would be really interested in hearing that proposal. You know, where there's a direct investment and then a grant list at the other side. So I sure hope we can see something like that from BADC, where investment leads to economic growth. But I'm comfortable saying that there's going to be some project management. I'm especially comfortable because knowing that we're qualified census tract. We're one of 11 communities in Vermont: St. Albans, Newport, Winooski, Barre City, Burlington, Rockland City. They're qualified, that we're qualified census tracts, and that means that the Treasury is going to presume that certain types of activities are eligible when they're provided in qualified census tracts. And so, and those include addressing health disparities and the social determinants of health. They include building stronger neighborhoods, including housing investments. They include addressing educational disparities by COVID-19, like early learning services, and promoting healthy childhood environments like childcare. So there's some certain categories where I think we can feel really safe about saying we're going to be able to build back to that. And it sounds like Clerk Dawes also thinks that there could be some one-time expenses to build inventory. And although we could hear more details about that, but
I would have to go through the budget to look, you know, a real quick thing, it looks like there may be some line items in police and fire where there's been an increase this year. I mean, we're talking a few thousand here and a few thousand there, but I do, because you've given me the mic. I have been completely against this idea up to this point in time. However, I think where you're going with it might be a way to support it, which is talk about putting 50,000, $100,000 of ARPA money into the budget, but don't feel right now that we have to identify exactly what it's supporting. It may support the new positions. It may support expenses in the budget. But no, because we know there will be administrative expenses associated with managing ARPA over the next fiscal year.
And we need administrative capacity.
I would probably say even 150,000.
No, I'm not going up.
But to that point, I feel very similarly to Clerk Dawes, where I've been very much against this up until now, but it's basically a cost savings. We're gonna spend the money on administering ARPA one way or the other. So there might as well be some ARPA money in the budget to help us actually do it.
I just need a point of clarification here. We can't put ARPA money into the budget. We have to reduce costs.
And I think the clarification is just where would we all end on an amount that would be funded positions or an amount that would be, it might zero out a line or decrease a line here in the assumption that it's going to be used by ARPA funds to replace, but we just need to come up with a number.
Dawn, could it be added to the budget in like our transfers? Could it be added as a line item in transfers that just said transfer to ARPA, $100,000?
I have to look into that, but I would feel more comfortably if we separated the two.
Yeah, okay.
So either way, is there a number that council would feel comfortable with? I hear the clerk saying 100,000.
So I'm not bidding.
Reel that one back in.
Let's put Carol on the spot.
And
I get a vote at the end in March, but right now,
We're hiring a position to manage the ARPA funds. It should come out of the ARPA funds solely outside of the conversation of the budget. That's a separate entity. The budget is supposed to be set up for, I mean, if ARPA disappeared tomorrow, then we would have that position in the budget. And
So I gotta say, this is similar to any other position that we've had grant funding for, whether it was the police grant that we accepted 2 years ago, whether it was detective positions. If those funds go away, those are in our budget. School resource officer, I mean, that's partially funded by us. So any of those types of positions, if the other funding goes away, it's still a position in our budget. So we're looking at our budget as a whole, and Steve's gonna need the staff in order to get some of this work done. And we know that if, say we put in, I'll say 150,000 out of 2.5 million, we're gonna still have a lot of discussion on other funding that can be utilized.
listen, I'm in the minority. Let's just move on.
So with that, is there a number that we could try to?
Just so we're on the same platform, total of the 4 positions with benefits and everything, so I have 297,400.
It's how much?
297,400.
So that's why if we were saying 50% for all the positions, that's why I was saying about 150, about 300. So I'm just using round terms.
Yeah.
So being that I'm not in favor of doing 50% for all 4 positions, I think $100,000 would be good. If that would just, for example, let us cover, let's say we were to give these duties to the assistant DPW director, that allocation is 101.5. So if we allocate $100,000, it would take care of that position for year 1 to help us administer it. Just that.
Yeah, but let me I think the way it will happen is that we will track the time of those positions, quite frankly, on bureau manager or whatever.
Yeah.
They can be tied administratively to the ARPA funds, projects, or whatever. So it's not like a certain amount goes to a certain position. It's, you identify the aggregate amount, and then as we work through the projects, work through the years, and charge the time, we'll track the time. It's still.
So I'm at
Did I mishear Don? I mean, I thought she said that her take was that you need to reduce the budget. So you take, $100,000 out of it to $297,000 would become $197,000 in the budget, and you would off budget fund a position at $100,000.
Whether it's one position or parts.
Whatever.
Yes, yes, you're correct.
And
I think we're all saying the same thing.
So that's how it would work, that amount would be taken out of the budget. And then when those people hire, whatever, then.
But it's 75%, we're gonna have to manage 35 to go. 75% of the position in the budget. We have to find at least 25% eligible ARPA project management. That we could charge. If we were fortunate, if we budgeted 25%, but in actuality, you have 30 or 35 or 40%, so what's the better?
Councilor Stockwell?
But it doesn't limit our use of ARPA funds for other items in the budget. That will come from, but we do 200,000.
No, it doesn't limit, it impacts. In other words, we've got $2.5 million of ARPA funds. If you're gonna allocate $100,000 to the administrative support, then you only got 2.4 million to allocate the rest of those.
Right, but my question is more like, if there are other items in here, as per Carol's discussion, it doesn't limit our use of ARPA funds for those items. By saying we're gonna cut out this money, no.
I would think so. I'll have Carol.
I don't know what's in your budget though. Specifically, I don't know what's in the budget that would be considered ARPA eligible.
Well, we do know that admin is an allowed expense. So, I can imagine a small portion of the finance director's expenses going to that, a small portion of the manager's expenses going to that. We don't have 100% clarity yet from the feds on that, but I do know that admin expenses are an allowed expense, not just project management, but admin. So there's the possibility that those kinds of things would fall into the same category too. And by putting $100,000 of cuts into the budget to be covered by ARPA, doesn't limit us to $100,000.
And that fund number, the ARPA fund number, they go across all the departments.
If that's what it turns out to be. Yeah.
Okay, got it.
That's right.
There was just a question for both Don and Steve. I was thinking about, as professional engineers, thinking about, capital, or stating the programs or projects or capital projects. What percent of it is generally dedicated to administrative costs? And I know a lot of times when the state stands up a program, they try to aim for admin costs below 10%. So $2.5 million, $250,000. And what does it, how many hours the finance director time, just the finance director time would it take, or the payroll, to keep track of 2.5 million or 2.5.
It's interesting because we traditionally don't track things that way. Because there's a lot of things, a lot of programs that we receive funding from that don't allow any admin. Many grant programs don't allow any admin. So we have traditionally not thought about that or tracked that as an allowed expense.
But if I were to give you a guesstimate from the city's, I would say 5% or less of the staff time. And that number can change, of course, as the staff. Well, I'm gonna say somewhere in the 5% range, give or take. Normally when project budgets are prepared, usually budget consultants, whatever, the budget at least 15 to 20% of the project costs to soft costs, which would be the engineering and so on and so forth. But our level of support doesn't always level of support. Just trying to get the broad. I would say that it's a rough guess. 5%.
That's really helpful. And I know, for my own time sheet, I have 6 codes that go back to all these different cost centers. So I have to be thinking about, how do I put my time sheet, okay, I'm working on 2 hours of this, and then let me feel back with that. So.
And I appreciate Councilor Henrik's comment earlier about the budget being two different things. But I do still, I feel even more strongly now that if we're going to towards this budget, instead of in the budget, I would really like that $1,000 from surplus.
Yeah, we'll get there in about 2.
I know, I'm just saying, in my mind, these things are connected.
So, Council, from what I'm hearing, we can use an amount that's 100,000. We can task the staff to understand how that would be applied to this budget. And then when it's brought back to us at a future time, it will show how the general fund budget is reduced by those expenditure amounts.
Why don't we plan on bringing that back to you on the 18th?
The 11th?
The 11th.
Yeah, the 11th.
Lots of stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Now, Steve, now.
So that's.
All I'm saying, we can kill 2 birds with 1 stone. We come back.
And if that's pretty much a consensus, I know it's not a consensus, but it sounds like 100,000 to cover that.
Move that we accept.
Motion, is there a second? Second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
Nay.
So moving back, we decided that we were going to have a little bit more on line item discussion before approaching the surplus, but I can go either way. So does anyone want to do any more line items? Let's start there. I'm going to start first with a possible addition, and this just came up because of Monday's conversation with the different committees. We did our volunteer recognition across the board. It was not everybody gets the information because they're not online. When they look at a paper, there's going to be not all the items that the city wants to get out there because we have a limited amount of space. We could pay for ads, but they have discussed either doing a newsletter or a literature drop. And I don't know if that is anything that council's interested in. If it's not, then fine, we'll just leave it out. If it is something you're interested in, it would cost a lot. So I just wanted to throw that out there as a possible addition.
So just to clarify, the cost would be for the printing for the literature.
It would be for the printing and mailing, because I don't know if all these groups would be going door to door, but if they were willing to do that, then it would just be printing costs.
I do believe that Barrytown's newsletter is created by the assistant city manager, not a position we have here at City Hall. Just something to think about.
Yeah, so who would write it?
That's what I was getting at.
That's no easy task, right? What is it? Newsletters are things that a lot of people agree with things and act with things. It's just, the idea is easy, the implementation is difficult. My suspicion, it's not the right word, I suspect that different department heads or different members of the town's government to whoever the editor is, and then it's the editor's job to pull together each quarter.
So again, I'm throwing it out there. If it's not this year, then that's fine too. I just want to make sure that
I'm a little out of the limb here. So the council wanted to try that. I think a logical place to try to produce this would be my office. Would be to have Jody, if you will, and try to pull it together. You know, whether it succeed or not, I don't know, but we may in that capacity to try to publish it or something.
No, I raised my hand after the two of you.
Okay, well, I've talked plenty already. I think this is a great idea. It might be not. And we're going through a lot of transitioning happening in we don't know at the end of the day if we're gonna have these extra positions in the budget to help our stressed out staff. And this seems just like one more. They already do department head reports, and now once a month, they're also gonna. And now they're also going to have to do a monthly newsletter blurb, and it's like, I do a lot of newsletter type things for my job, and they sound really simple, and then you go to actually do it in like 6 hours of your time formatting paragraphs, and it's not.
I would just like to echo that. I think it's gonna take a little bit more conversation. It is a great idea, but I don't think this is the time.
Yeah, I'm the same place. We've got, the Times Argus, we've got Facebook, we've got Front Porch Forum, we've got our webpage. I think that at this moment, definitely not. And quite frankly, if we were to do something like that, maybe we could contract, have somebody do some contract work for us.
There's nothing that stops the city from doing what we offer to the chamber, to the waste district or whatever. So if the city wanted to sort of get in a rotation where we produce something, again, it may make things easier at the end of the year when you're doing your annual report and saying, okay, what happened, right? It's a blur. Because you've done it in increments, and there's nothing that prevents you from posting that in different forms. So you can put it on a Front Porch Forum, you can put it on the website, you can put it on the Facebook page. It does take something to do it, but there's that opportunity that's there right now.
And I also think it's incumbent upon us as counselors to get information out there.
Janet?
Hi, yes, thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to remind the council that when I gave my budget presentation a month and a half ago, I made this suggestion, and it came out of something Carol and I, the clerk and I, have been wanting to do for a while. But to Teddy's point, it's actually a lot more work than you think. And I still am an advocate for it. I've been wanting to try to get this program off the ground for a couple of years. There are a lot of people given, I mean, as Mr. Delcor said, we've got all these means to get our information. People still don't get it. And the direct mailing for the All In for Barre got more recognition because every door in Barre City got a postcard. There's something to be said for the old-fashioned newsletter. So I'm always going to advocate for it, but it is going to be a lot of work for one person to do. Thank you.
So sounds like it's a good idea, something for discussion probably next year's budget.
Especially if Janet has her junior planner. Get that project right on.
As long as he's working on that.
That's right.
So I don't think we took the vote yet.
There was no vote on that.
Okay. No.
There was no motion on that.
Okay. So anything else for line item discussion? Anything else that people see for additions, deletions?
Just to be clear, we're not at it now.
We're not at it.
Dawn had something?
Yeah, the discussion about ambulance headphones. We right now have.
Everyone talk amongst yourselves.
Or 85, I just wanted to point that out, that is where we're at currently, or last year, sorry, 529,000. 95,000.
Yeah, so line item 95. So if you look on page 3 of the budget.
Okay.
Yeah, we just, I did catch up with Dawn after last conversation. Got, I think yesterday, the ambulance revenue update from Bonnie through November, and it shows we're running about $508,000. We have 450 budgeted in this year's budget. We have 485, right, budgeted in fiscal year 23, the budget you're looking at. And I had toyed with the idea of maybe saying, well, maybe we can make that 485. I'm sorry, 490, maybe 495. But I took another look at the data this morning, and The reason we're up to that $500,000 projection is we had one $52,000 a month. If I take that out and then just project on the average of the 4 lower months, it's closer to the 485. You know, and before you set the budget in January, but I was tempted, but I'm a little bit, I don't mind.
Yeah, I would. Because every single year we budget for a specific amount on the ambulance, and every single year we look at the end and we're very disappointed. Except for, well, except for this historically.
Is the bump due to COVID?
Well, and that's what I'm wondering too, is are the number of runs based on, because there's more medical opens?
Yeah, talk like about that, but I remember having a discussion with Doug and Pete, height of COVID in 2020. He was surprised that they were having fewer ambulance runs. I think it was part of it was people were apprehensive about going to the hospital, whatever, but just, it seems like it's counterintuitive. What I believe I recall Doug saying, runs were down.
Dawn, I'm assuming that the extra federal money we got that we're still trying to find our 34,000 is not included in general fund. Okay.
Well, it will be booked to general.
Oh, okay. So that too
But
is
it's one,
an anomaly. So that's, we would want to make sure we're not thinking that that's regular revenue.
Yeah, it's not in this line item.
Okay.
So, sorry, just to clarify, and this gets triggered.
No, I was purposefully speaking in code, so.
So just trying to show, we have, basically we have a certain amount of money from the federal government that we just haven't figured out how to go. Yep. Well, not figured out.
We haven't received it.
Oh.
Yeah. But it will be 22. Oh. And it will not be in the ambulance income line item to skew the numbers. It will be by itself.
It'll be part of the federal grant line. Yeah.
Right, we got 86,000, or no, sorry, 63,000 in fiscal 21. Located that same thing. And it's essentially to make up for the shortfall of ambulance revenue that we experience due to
And so really the question is, you're concerned that the 485 is budgeted to too high a rate, we should be more conservative and scale down that.
No.
The opposite.
The opposite.
We were thinking of raising it and enticed by that idea yesterday. I looked at it this morning one more time. So,
Yeah, the 21 audited is 529, and I think it was projected at 508 this year, is what you were
Right now.
saying.
as of the November.
So the most recent 2 years would show it higher, but to Councilor Buch's point, you raise it to say 500,000, and all of a sudden you have a $35,000 short.
Okay, I'm sorry. I will say also is in terms of a revenue opportunity, and I mentioned it earlier because I didn't know if there was really capacity in EMT, but the people who are getting stranded after hours and can't get home because there are no transit services. I mean, and the hospital's paying like officer rides sometimes to try to get a taxi from Stowe so people can come back down to the city. That could be a potential revenue opportunity, not maybe that using an ambulance vehicle, but if there are, if they're not out on a call and a need is there, they're saying this is happening almost daily.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't mind people riding in my Jeep for $100 a pop.
Right? It's your license.
That's fine.
You can ride in the back of my truck.
Yeah.
You can be the only Uber driver in the very city.
Nobody's done it.
But I'm with Michael too. Our heart's been broken too many times.
No. I think we're budgeting prudently, just trying to be alert to the budgeting, but I think.
Yeah.
It was tempted for 24 hours, but.
Yeah, and the same thing happens with the soft budget. I mean, right now, we see that there's no real precipitation out there. But come January, we could have the iciest kind of.
Yeah.
So any other line items that anybody wanted to discuss?
None specific. I mean, we could go through it and, you know, do $500 here, $500 there.
No, I agree. But so if there's none that are specific, then I would say that we've addressed that item. And then we can go back to the discussion on the fund balance allocation, which the manager has proposed 50, 30, 20 over the next 30 years. We, at the last budget meeting, I discussed 50, 25, 25, but I think realistically, this is a better way because you're weaning the city off of that amount a little bit more.
Well, that was before the 100,000. So.
Well, no, but I'm saying.
But it was 47.
So.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but if we were at 3.4%, we had 100,000 that we're using for ARPA, and this would be another 50,000. It would actually get us down to about 10% for our budget.
Which, considering the situation that's going on in our world, I think that's probably a better goal than 3.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Councilor. My only, so I am very much in favor of the $50,000. Like I said, basically people were asked for services that they did not receive because of COVID. I don't necessarily feel comfortable, this was one of my issues with the cost grants too. I don't necessarily feel comfortable to committing the next 2 councils to accepting a service. I'm not opposed to.
Well, they don't have to.
Yeah, this is just, it's projected.
Okay.
Yeah.
They can do whatever they want. Just like if we, when we have the conversation about the fund balance, say we take the manager's recommendation that's on here, that 200 that's undesignated balance that we put into a rainy day fund or whatever we want to call it. It all depends on how we set it there for the next council to be able to utilize those funds.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that let's say we have a $200,000 reserve fund. I think that's going to get enough by the EOR clothing or some other capital impact.
So I'm opposed to on this proposed budget. And reason being is that this Department of Public Works capital plan is the canary in the coal mine of the infrastructure liabilities of the city. We're grossly under budgeting capital investments. This is the capital improvement plan that it was handed out.
It was sent out to council, but it was also provided for the.
Well, and it's not quite a plan. It's a list of capital projects. So it's not a plan. It's not a plan format yet. But I mean, it's starting to suggest, you know, you can get a glimpse of what the needs are, and even just to meet the paving requirements of the city, we need to be paving 3 to 4 miles each year, or maybe under a mile. Just to keep up. So we're digging a hole every single year. We're not budgeting more than 3 to 4 times what we're budgeting right now. And so I think this is an opportunity to try to catch up a little bit and apply this money to capital.
So the reason why I support what Councilor Watson's suggesting is this is just one-time funding. So it's not like there's going to be a 50,000 each year that we'll be applying for it. And if we can get down the number to about 2%, which I think is 1.99, we might have a better opportunity of putting out that local options tax. And if that's successful, that would go exactly to where you're talking about. We have infrastructure needs that are the road. Like that's the one thing that we haven't really.
I mean, but that's banking on something. The reason that I'd have reservations about that is it's banking on something that may or may not happen. But we know we have the surplus. We know we have capital needs right now, and I think a local option tax is honestly going to be very difficult to communicate to the city right now without a report on the city's voters, without a report on exactly what revenues are paid, how much are being paid by people outside the city, how much are being forecasted to be paid by people inside the city, and what concretely what are they going to get for that money in the next 4 years. We don't have that. Or we have to start about 10, 25% of a capital program and budget, but we're not all the way there. And I think we're more likely to get yes if you can connect, say, yes vote on this is going to lead to these improvements on your street, in your neighborhood, downtown. And we can't deliver that right now. So, yeah, I think
the local option sales tax really pretty much impacts the merchants within the city. And maybe some other.
no, like who pays the tax, which customers? Yeah, what percent of
Yeah, I'm not sure I should get that granular. I mean, when people go for buy a meal or buy merchandise or whatever, I mean, I think the reality is always sales tax. I'm not saying that would some opposition, if it passed ballot, but frankly, the commitment would be the same as we made when we passed the local options tax every year. Yeah. That money is going to go for capital improvement projects, and actually with streets and capital.
Streets and sidewalks.
Yeah. We've had that. We've kept that promise. But we could expand on that. We've got the beginning of a capital improvements list. So I don't think it's hard to show what the money will be used for as part of the
Yeah, so for example, if there's $750,000 that can be generated from this, we can apply it directly to that list that you have in front of you. 750,000 is much more than what we're allowed, able to do right now. And then it's really a choice to the voters. If they want to see those improvements, they will vote for that. If they don't, then we're right back to square one. That's what I said.
So, Councilor Hammer, out of the surplus $568,000 already approved by council, call it $85,000. So that leaves us with, let's call it 175. That 485, we use 50 for subsidy.
No, it's more like 400,000. It's 200 plus 100 plus 98. Sorry, I didn't have a second.
From 568,000 minus 84,000, how do you get 398? Regardless. So, Councilor Hamilton, do you have a proposal for how much money would you want to put towards streets, paving, sidewalks, capital improvements? Is there any amount of money that we could dedicate right now towards that? That would make you feel comfortable with?
Well, it's 100, it would be a total of 100. So 50, 30, 20, correct? Because that's
We can only right now commit for next year.
correct, but we would, right, but I understand that, but the proposal would be for 50, 30, 20, which means that we would section that off into a separate account to be used next year as an automatic dump in. Although the chances of us having a surplus after having a surplus probably for the last 10 years is pretty good. Well, but it would be similar to what we've been doing with, we've actually had a pretty good, we technically probably have had a surplus for the last several years because we've been dumping the money into the cemetery fund and
We haven't had a surplus.
It paid off the rest of the cemetery.
Right.
He planned to pay off the cemetery debt. He's like, $500,000
right. Well, and there's a difference between a surplus at the end of the year and a fund balance.
No, exactly. Sorry,
So,
but
yeah.
my bad.
So I guess I would then amend the proposal for just $50,000 for this year. If we were to do that, is there a number comfortable?
My proposal on that would be 0 to future budgets. And in recognition that I like Manager McKenzie's suggestion of the rainy day fund. He pointed out that we have about $200,000 in emergency repairs that are unbudgeted most years. We have in our capital equipment financial plan for FY '22 unfunded equipment need of $716,000. And we go for our paving plan, we know we're 75%, 66 to 75% behind where we should be. We need to invest in capital infrastructure. And that's where I put that.
So again, this is why I'm.
Sam had her hand up.
The local options where that 716,000, we wouldn't even be able to approach that with a one-time fund here, where I think a local option sales tax is something that is necessary in order to meet that gap. We have to, going through the general fund budget, we haven't found a way to decrease that amount for our operation costs. So we have to find another way. And for me, if we have our general fund budget at too much of an amount, we're going to ask for too much in 1 year. The voters just won't go for it.
We're really talking about 3%.
Well, it was 3.4. We've got it down to 2.5. If this 50,000 goes in, it'll be down to 2%. And I think that's more of a.
So really the question is, for a voter, do I pay for a 2% increase and say yes to a new tax for my sales, or do I say 3% or maybe yes to both? I don't know. I just think with the federal stimulus and the not quite finished capital, the fact that we don't have a capital programming budget, this local option tax this year, I just don't think it's going to be successful. And I think we need to invest this capital right now. We have the capital investment even if the voters can say yes.
You could be right, Council. It may not be successful this year. There have been 3 tries to get the local option. Offset it with your concerns that get the tax rate at 2%. That's felt immediately. So tax advantage of the local option tax is that there are people outside the community who use the infrastructure of the community who are helping to contribute to paying that. So I think that's not only a reasonable approach, if you will, I think it's a strategic one as well.
I agree that when I look at this plan for streets, sidewalks, it's just disheartening that Grant Street is not.
Yeah.
And the sidewalk on Grant Street.
Oh, it's abysmal.
Abysmal. So, and people complain about it, and people can't with any kind of disability. It becomes a beautiful bike path, a new sidewalk. And you get this place that's really horrible.
Bill would have to speak to why one street is on there.
Yeah, no, it's not that.
And the reality is, whatever street you pick, there's gonna be that same.
Sure, my complaint isn't that there's one street over the other, it's that there's not enough of a plan to make the city, even the downtown part of the city, look really walkable, look really attractive, and appeal to people who are here. So that is a concern of mine, and it's certainly a concern of the street artists. That other places. So I have to be part of this, the budget balance allocation for a smaller part, but I agree that how often has the local option passed
But like I said, it took 3 tries to get what we have now.
And the first 2 tries included sales. And then when we dropped it, we were able to get it passed with just rooms, meals and alcohol.
So just one more comment, is we're talking about 568, there's been 84 that's already been allocated. If we're talking about 200,000 that's going to be used for a reserve fund, I'm not opposed if we said even 50,000 was used for this general fund subsidy, that the rest of the amount is used for capital. And I think that's what the manager has on here. It should not be 98, it's a bigger number than that.
Yeah, it is.
So no rainy day fund.
No, including the rainy day, that 98, I think is
It's 233
233.
instead of the 98. Yeah.
So
as the compromise, I think, which was what Councilor Watson was pointing to, is we could still do the reserve, we could still apply 50,000 this year, and then also for capital, put 233 as kind of like a compromise for that conversation.
This is kind of a conversation we should probably have at the back end of the budget discussion, but I mean, ultimately, I'll make a motion to do the 50,000, 30, and 20 as presented here.
Okay, there's a motion, is there a second?
I'll make a motion to basically do what the mayor just lined out, 50 this year, 20,000 reserve, rest as capital.
You mean 200,000 reserve?
Yes, that's what I meant, yes.
Okay, so we now have 2 motions.
His did not get a second. It's
Okay.
Councilor Watson's is for, out of the remaining amount, 200,000 goes for the undesignated balance. We use 50,000 for the general fund budget subsidy for this year, and the remaining 233,000 for capital.
If my math is right, just whatever the remainder is.
Is there a second to that? Okay, so for discussion, I think that gets to the heart of what Councilor Murphy, you were pointing at. The 50,000, really the selling point for me on this is I think if we have a general fund budget that isn't overwhelming to voters, they might be more willing to support a local options tax in this manner. And as just noted, that local options tax isn't hitting the very city residents directly all the time. It's the other people that are coming in to use those services. So if we're talking about street repair, those are the people that are driving in to our stores in order to take advantage of those services. So I'm hopeful.
It's the best way to.
But that's not what we're voting on. Right.
We're not
I'm
voting
just
on the
letting,
local options tax
right.
now, but I'm saying why I'm voting.
Yeah.
I would vote the way that I am.
For discussion on that, I think that's we're gonna talk about the local auction tax. It's later on the agenda. We can't bang on it. There are many merits to having more funding sources. And I'm not going to support this motion because I believe that we need to invest that $50,000 in a tremendous backlog of capital needs for infrastructure that is crumbling all over the city. People see it, people feel it under their feet, people feel it under their tires. We need to make an investment to catch up.
Can I have to give some defense to the city on this issue. I mean, I understand that as we're driving the streets every day, we feel every bump because it's the streets that we drive, but other municipalities are facing the same problem. And I don't want the public to think that we are alone in the infrastructure roads issues that we have. When you compare, I mean, no offense to our reporter here, but Montpelier on Barre Street, I mean, when's the last time you've been down that road? I mean, it's exactly, and we don't actually have that road in Barre, not one that I'm aware of. We don't have a road that people literally avoid because of how bad it is. And just something to think about, and that's a testament to the very thin budget that we've had over the years of this, you know, at least since I've been on city council. I mean, it's just, I just want to just want to give a little plug to the city because we're not as bad as it sounds. But, you know, especially when we're comparing ourselves to other municipalities, which as a side note, Montpelier has a $16 million budget. Yeah. Those people can afford it over
I
there.
don't think they've had their big project yet. And what used to be, we saw a large number of water main breaks in a year. They already had one over there this year, right?
And yeah, and our infrastructure is like 100 years old.
So,
I mean,
I'd like to just clarify with Dawn, with regards to the rainy day fund, the $200,000 rainy day fund. What we're essentially talking about is carrying that as a fund balance in the general fund.
For unplanned expenses.
Exactly. Perfect.
so
Wanted to make sure.
I just want to say that I disagree with the motion. I'll vote for it because it gets what I want this year. I would really like to have, I'll ask for the friendly amendment for the 30 and 20, but I'm not going to get it. So
My question though is,
I'm preparing, that's all. And that's fine. I think that what's proposed is a good idea. It kind of helps going into the future budgets. It doesn't matter. I made the friendly amendment. Nobody's going to second it. It's not a big deal.
like I said, the only reason I'm uncomfortable with that is I don't feel like it's real. And next year's council could just decide to remove.
Next year's council could also, which is the reason why I have a problem with our, you know, our strategic planning with the council that could easily change complete, like a majority of the council could be gone in March. So, you know, it's,
Yeah, no, fair enough. Fair enough.
and that's okay. I mean, I will support the motion as it's presented because it gives me what I want this year.
Well, then I won't accept the friendly.
Well, in that case, hold it. No, I won't support it. Well, will you accept the friendly amendment now?
That's not how poker works. It's
So. Is there any other discussion on this?
Right. Will you call my bluff? If so, then I'll.
Okay, I don't hear any other discussion, so.
Taking Michael to Vegas.
So just to reiterate, the motion is, and to clarify, the $200,000 is going to be a reserve, but it is left in the basically as a carry forward for next year. So that the next council can use that as necessary.
And that number is, just for the sake of context, that number is based off of the manager's historical analysis of.
So with that 200,000, with 50 being allocated to fund budget subsidy, and the remainder goes to capital. So all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed, nay. Okay, so
What you got for me, Steve?
Well, I realize you probably have, but just for the record.
to know, Carol, you were correct with the $233,000.
Cool.
That's why she's the chair.
So, council, I believe we're now down to item 7, which is the discussion and or action regarding the local option sales tax. Go ahead, Michael.
All right, I pulled it up here from Forbes.com. 30% over the past year, price of used cars and trucks. I'm sorry, for energy, it's gone up 30%. Cars and trucks gone up 26.4%. Beef is up 20%, which I understand would not make, you know, it would not affect the local options tax, but it affects your average person that's living paycheck to paycheck on a fixed income, or someone that's on welfare, or someone that, you know, doesn't have the, you know, high paying job of a state job. So no offense to everybody that's in a state job and local municipality, but you know, that's, and it affects them as well. I do not support doing the local options tax. Barre City, Ward 2 has voted no on it. The only time that they voted for it was the local option tax, which was very close, mind you, Ward 2. and I'm looking directly at Teddy because he represents Ward 2. Ward 2 has not been overly favorable to sales tax, and I do not think we should be doing it. Now I'm done.
Council, I'm gonna also say that I'm not looking for a decision today. I think if we need more information on how much would be gained, how that can be applied, I think that's the questions that we should be asking today to see what we can have for that future conversation. That's what's that.
I mean, only hesitating because of the comment you just made, but yeah.
Oh, no,
We should do it. We should use the money to make those capital investments, street sidewalks, paving. It's really the best way to get to capture the revenue of the numbers have changed now, but pre-COVID, we're an 8,000 population city that goes to over 20,000 during the day because of all the workers in the surrounding municipalities. They're all using our infrastructure. They're not paying for it. The taxpayers of Barre City are paying for it. And that also hurts folks' bottom line. I do think it faces an uphill battle. I think that, more taxes is always an uphill battle but to the mayor's point, people want our neighboring communities to start paying into taking care of our infrastructure. This is really the best and only way to do it. And just for some context, if someone went out and again, a lot of the folks who are low income, they do their shopping at Walmart and Shaw's up on the hill, places that are not in Barre City. There are plenty of people who are low and moderate income that do plenty of shopping in Barre City. That's not what I'm saying. But our biggest grocery stores, which are people's biggest bills, are not in Barre City, so this won't hit that. And let's just say someone's gorgeous. Someone wants to build a porch, goes down to Allen Howard, spends $1,000 on lumber. Their total bill because of this will be $1,010. That's not a make or break thing here. And if, let's say, let's make it a little more reasonable, you go out, you spend $500 downtown. That total is now going to be $505. It's not impacting people to a proportional amount that it's really going to hurt anyone's bottom line. But it does bring in a significant amount of funding for the city to allow us to do a lot of the capital projects, sidewalk projects that we've been talking about, and that the people of Barre do want. Just our infrastructure is being used by 15,000 people who don't live.
I had a conversation this past week on another topic with the two legislative advocates from VLCT. We were talking about other stuff, but we got talking about this. And one of the points that they made, which hadn't occurred to me, is Vermont now collects sales tax on online shopping. This would be collected from online shopping, where UPS and FedEx trucks are driving over our roads, and this would help support improvements and maintenance of that infrastructure. So it's another way to think about where the money's coming from.
Michael and Steve.
So let me get this straight. So if I purchase something from Amazon, it's an additional 1%?
Yep.
Okay, well, that's good to know. I mean, I feel a little bit better about that. If we could just do it for online sales, that would make me feel a lot better. But first of all, grocery stuff, not going to be affected by this, correct?
Right.
Because that we don't.
Unless you're buying sales taxable items.
Right, yeah, unless you're, beer, stuff like that. That's not going to be taxable for this. We're talking about the stuff that you go down to, someone that's walking down to like Dollar General to get, which, and I understand $10, right? And all I can think of is the quote from, was it Jimmy Carter that said, put on a sweater? I think it was Jimmy Carter that said, put on a sweater. No, it's not okay. And not when we're facing, the energy, which I believe that this would also be taxing gas. It would be taxing, cars. Those are.
It doesn't affect cars.
Oh, it doesn't? Well,
But
either way.
respectfully, like,
You know what?
the concern you're raising is not one that, frankly, is based on the reality of what people are buying and how people are spending it. Again, they go down to Nelson's Hardware to do some cell phone improvement projects because they can't afford to hire a contractor. Those things that they purchase cost $150. $1.50.
When your pension change, and it's cheaper to get your item in New Hampshire, you go to New Hampshire.
Not when you have to fill up your tank
I-
of gas.
I understand. I know people that go to New Hampshire to shop for big ticket items, and it's because of the additional taxes. That's fine. Lack of taxes, sorry.
So just to know, those people are already going to New Hampshire. So they're
That is correct. That is correct. But what I'm saying though is that as you start increasing the prices, and that's fine. I'm a minority on this one too, and that's perfectly fine.
I think that we don't know what the voters are gonna decide, but it's in the city's best interest to put this on.
So, and I gotta support what Councilor Emmerich was saying before. When we look at all the infrastructure needs, we need to find a revenue source. And this is one, as Councilor Wazazak was noting, it's not just hitting our property tax. You know, it's not us directly. It's going to be some of the stuff that we buy in the downtown, but it's also going to be others that are coming in from surrounding communities.
People who can't afford houses.
Yeah, I think one thing the voters could do good about this type of revenue source, instead of seeing it in their property tax bill, is the regional equity. I live at the regional equity, and that it's a revenue source that's not just carried by the residents of Barre City. And I live on Hill Street, and that was just paved, gosh, a year and a half, 2 years ago. Up by the city line, Barre Town, you would think you could look in the grooves of that brand new pavement. It must be 2 or 3 inches deep from the trucking, freight, UPS, all serving Barre Town. And so that was an investment the Barre City taxpayers made from, by and large, from real estate taxes to benefit by and large traffic going to another. It doesn't really, have tremendous benefit to the city of Barre, and nor are we getting anywhere near what we need to from the gas taxes from the state of Vermont to run a transportation system. It's like $140,000, right? That we're getting in state highway. It's totally inadequate to run the transportation system that we run. And so I think when we're looking at a $40 million backlog, and we're doing short-termism decisions to buy down the tax rate and to continue to just ignore this problem, I think that this is worth a real consideration. One thing that the voters, I think, would be more likely to say yes to is if this city had a real capital program and budget with reserve funds and just a really a lot of clarity about what they're going to get for this money. And unfortunately, we're not there yet. The only way I see that we stop digging a hole with this $40 million is that there will be severe cuts to some department in city budget. I know, like for St. Albans City to try to turn it around. See, I believe I heard that they went to a part-time volunteer firefighter force. So it was a hybrid volunteer professional firefighter force. That would be a really tough conversation. I don't see any other revenue sources available to us under Vermont's governance to catch up with a $40 million backlog. And so I think there's merits here. I think it's going to be a tough conversation. I wish we were better prepared to say exactly what this money is going to be spent on in the next 5 to 10 years. But I think it has a lot of merit.
So to note on that, I think one of the charges we can give back to staff is how would that $750,000 be applied, and not just this 1 year, but over a period of time. And if that has already been started, we could start using what information we have to formulate that plan. And it might not be a full 10-year; it could be the next couple of years. So at least we have something that voters can see. To Councilor Stockwell's point, if Granite Street, that sidewalk, is not on a list, and we want it to be on a list sooner, the best way to do that is to have more revenues and be able to address those sooner. So, the whole plan that's been presented was based based on, and I can't remember the annual amount right now, but just put another 750,000 in that.
Yeah, so I would, I'm manager, I'm not a counselor, but I would say, I would respect Michael's concern about the lack of support it's had in some boards. My theory is nothing ventured, nothing gained. I don't have your money, but if we don't start trying, it may take 2 weeks. But if we don't start, we'll never be able to try to tap that revenue source. The other thing, a couple other things, we can develop capital needs plans for the next 5 years. Exhaustive. So we can identify what constructive uses that money can go to. This is aid to helping sell the Belknap, if you will. There's no better time to try to do it than when you're only asking for 2%. That's an increase in the. I don't think the community center or one or elsewhere that's anywhere near close to that number. And the fact that this is a way for additional revenues to not on the back of the city taxpayers, but to help support city infrastructure. And if we could have this separate substantial revenue source to go to capital projects, it means we don't have to try to find that money in the operating budget. The key to the operating budget is to go to grant business. That's a different track. But for the longest time, there is an alternative revenue source. The initial sales tax, but I think that's the only way. The only significant way we can start attacking capital backlog. The $40 million, that won't be all paid on back. Substantial amount of that will be substantial, 25, 50% maybe if we're lucky. Yeah, it still needs 20%, 20 million, but those are big numbers and they're not.
One thing with regards to the local option tax, on Tuesday, council is scheduled to approve the public hearings for the charter changes. And in addition to that information, I sent around a draft of language that's been talked about by the charter work group, by the council, by different councilors. And then Councilor Hemrick sent around some possible edits this morning. The one thing that has been
not to the whole council.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to out you right now. The one thing that has been talked about by a few different people is adding not only sales tax but cannabis to the local option tax. My research has been that that's not going to be an option, that cannabis is going to be taxed as a sales tax, and that you could add an LOT, that it would be covered under a sales tax, local option tax, but not a separate tax. We probably would want to do some more research, but my outreach to VLCT was that wouldn't be an option. So just part
just
of
to
the
rephrase that, so not as a separate item, but would be included as part of.
it would be right. So rather than having it say sales, cannabis, rooms, meals, alcohol, it would just say sales, rooms, meal, alcohol. That putting something in specific to cannabis, particularly since we would already be collecting the 1% on sales, then you're talking about double dipping. That's not likely going to be something that would be accepted by the legislature.
And I'm so sorry, I just can't help myself. Councilor Boone's earlier comment about not being able to afford homes, not being able to buy houses. We have I just hate for that comment to go unaddressed and seem like we were brushing it off. But you're right, housing is historically expensive right now, especially in Vermont. But we have a large proportion of our population in Vermont, in Barre City, are renters. We have But the reasons for it's like telling someone not to buy the daily cup of coffee at the end of the day so they can save up for college. Like the cost that the reason that folks can't afford to purchase houses, the reason that housing is so expensive, it's not because of a 1% local option sales tax. It's because of the guy who owns Amazon isn't paying any tax. It's because we're handing out subsidies to the Walmarts of the world. It's because there's huge income inequality and our tax system is set up right now to benefit the wealthiest and to hurt those who make the least. And this is a more progressive form of that, in which the more you have and the more you are buying, the higher your taxes are. And if you're not buying very much, you don't have very much, this is not going to severely hurt the bottom line. And I just think we have to be very clear about that. This is not what is driving Vermont's and this country's.
So just one other note, so Councilor Emmerich and Councilor Stockwell and I are working on some housing concepts. We hope to bring that back for that ARPA conversation. Sounds like staff would not be ready if we wanted to put that up to the 4th. So we would still have that conversation on January 11th. So we can bring that information at the same time that we have the infrastructure information I was requesting for from council at the last meeting. Hopefully that will also address some of the concerns about housing. Okay, so any other questions, comments on the local options tax? Okay, if not, I think that we can wrap up. Just, kind of summary, we've decided that 100,000 is going to be used from ARPA to fund some of the those related expenses, which will reduce the general fund amount. We have allocated 50,000 toward that amount for the general fund budget subsidy, which brings us down to a 1.99% projected tax.
Can it? Sorry. We're talking about additional taxes and different types of taxes. Something that's going to be happening in our municipality is the separation of the career center. And once that happens, that's going to be an additional district, which right now may not make a difference in the tax rate. But when other municipalities are making decisions for Barre City, that becomes a problem. So, 5 years down the road, when the Career Center says, hey, we're kind of busting at the seams here and we actually want to move to a different community or, something like that. And it goes before the entire district and the increase in taxes for them gets passed in every single municipality except for Barre. We're not going to have any say in that. So those are the kind of things that are also coming down the pike as we're talking about local option taxes and, anyway, just wanted to point that out.
My hope is that when the Career Center says we need to double in size, we need a completely new campus, that they take it out of the city and that the school no longer takes property off our tax rolls like they did with the center up on Allen Street.
Which
we host all the freebies except for Barre Town School. So I'm hoping they go to Middlesex, or that they go to Facein, or that they go somewhere else.
If they expand, I can see what you're saying on that, but if they're not expanding at the current location, or if they expand at the current location under the current setup, right.
Yeah, Michael, I mean, if say CVCC left, there's a spot that they're currently in that they just built a new building up on Allen Street. They can move that back down into that building space and then sell the building for a profit building.
Which already looks like a warehouse, so it could easily be used as such.
There is.
Maybe they can move up to the Civic Center.
But we're. Do we have any other conversations?
Should there be, this is a different subject, should there be a disclaimer on our agenda that's published in the Times Argus that says we have an online option that may not work?
That's a vote of confidence.
Well, really,
Jeff was on, and you just walked in, and Sue was sitting at the table ruffling through her papers, and Carol was walking by, Jake, and so I was there, and then, I wasn't, and Jeff still was, and so but I don't know how that happened.
Well, Dawn, you went through the same thing, right? You
Yeah.
got kicked out and then got
Yeah.
back in.
Well, this did too. This lost internet connection for a bit and then it came back.
But-
So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna reach out to Vermont League of Cities and Towns. They do have a toolkit for hybrid meetings already. And I just wanna double check for statutorily, because I think statutorily, all we need to do is provide a physical location for people to attend to. We have been going beyond that, and I don't know legally if we would have to shut down a board meeting because we would have a quorum of people here. If we had a quorum outside, I think then we would have to. So because we wouldn't have a body to.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to be cavalier.
No, I get it. You know,
That was my
if
understanding
there
as well.
were, you know, internet interruption or whatever, and I was scrambling after that happened, right? So, and, you know, I was going to the email that I got, using that link, and it said the meeting hasn't started yet. I was going to the one online, and that was saying that it was in progress, and it's like, okay, can't be both.
Yeah, and it was, and I just for, when I opened my laptop and I clicked the link, I got right in.
Yeah.
I said, you're good. So it was-
And I didn't at home.
Strange.
So one of the problems that you're dealing with.
I did, but it was after like 5 minutes of trying.
Is our camera system is not being used as our camera system. The sound system is all being run through CBTV's equipment, which I have no control over. So I'm getting complaints that people can't hear you guys, they can't. I can either shut off CBTV and then the video version won't work for CBTV, or I can use ours and people will have to request a video link.
Is it possible, I'm wondering if they've got, yeah, they get room in the snake, I don't know if they've got room on the board, to put the owl speaker and microphone into the system, or the microphone into the system, so it would
It
be
is.
running on the same.
It won't use the owl microphone, it uses their system, that's why there's a microphone up
okay.
there.
All right.
One thing that peculiar.
Yeah, but that's not a mouse, we need a mouse.
I mean, they're all logged on, you know, but muted on Zoom, you know, at their seats. So you can see each one of them individually. You can't, their microphones aren't an issue, but their microphones pick their voices up better than, you know, the Orca equipment does, because it's right in front of them.
That might be a good idea.
That's what Mike was complaining about. We were having a conversation here, but the mics were picking up you folks up there.
Right, because the mics are through CBTV.
Yeah, no, I understand, it's just that.
And this setup is, it's not set up to function in a circular pattern like this. When we bought the owl, it was set up so council was at the microphones up here. If you guys had all been sitting up here today, they would have been able to hear you.
And that's why we have the desk where people come up and sit at.
Well,
because it's-
and that's why the system that we're looking at and we're trying to develop in conjunction with the Civic Center Committee for Alumni Hall will be set up with Wi-Fi microphones connected to a system, so the system can be configured in any way, shape we want with a huge monitor on the front wall.
Well, part of the problem too is that mic is on the table, that's on the table there is a close-up mic.
Right.
And I know CBTV has mics, and that's what we need, is we need a mouse mic.
Those should be working up there, I would think, but I don't know.
People on Zoom can hear people on Zoom. So if you're on Zoom at your seat, it doesn't know where you are, right? I mean, you could be at the library, you could be in, you know, in a different state, but it's gonna pick you up. So you don't need it from here because you're seeing who's in the room and you're talking to each other. But, you know, for the people who are on Zoom, who are listening to you, they'll hear you if you're, you know, acting as if you're on Zoom, even though you're not meeting.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good idea, is have it set up so that we talk into the computers.
And
But-
we get started, Tuesday.
Oh, go ahead, Doug.
Hi, Mayor. I just wanted to let you know, because you're talking about the audio video system for today. It was absolutely terrible. If you had a question for me, I'm not even sure I would have known you were speaking to me. It's just terrible. Unfortunately, I had a COVID shot yesterday, and I'm not into getting up and going down there like Michael did. But that was really what I needed to do, because it's impossible to hear
Yeah.
Okay, that's good feedback.
at home.
Yeah, but we don't pay attention to you.
I know. What the hell?
We don't pay attention.
That's something that's it's not on our agenda for discussion.
I'm glad that Councillor Booton did go down there, because he's basically the only one that I can hear.
which is why I sat up here.
Okay, there's a motion and a second for adjourning. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Okay, thank you, everyone.